just want to introduce our moderator today, Chef Logan Niles of Food Innovation and Growth Architect, Blue Nile Consulting. Can everyone hear? There we go. All right, I'm going to pass on to Mike.
All right, good morning, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Everybody in the back as well? Wonderful. So thank you for joining us today. This is the Food Waste Prevention and Circular Economy breakout, as it were. And we have an incredible panel that will give you some information, answer some questions for us, and get a deeper dive into how we can utilize the food products that we utilize better, how we can prevent waste, higher use, again, for the environment, and then, of course, for businesses as a whole. To my left, and I guess to my left, and also to your left to right. One moment. Okay. Too bad we can't close those doors. That's a little loud. All right. So we have Emily Penna, who's the Senior Manager of Food Security Initiatives of FareStart. Ángela Ortez-Zarate, Director of Quick Serve Development at the Mama Group. Sheryl Anayas, Senior Program Manager for Seattle Public Utilities, and Cullen Naumoff, Organics Lead at the Washington State Department of Ecology. So we're going to start with a few questions specifically for Emily and Ángela, and then we'll follow that with presentations by Sheryl and Cullen, and then we'll open it up for audience questions, and if we have time later, then we have a few questions of our own. So I'll start here with you, Emily. Can you describe the circular economy projects, first with City Fruit and then with PCC and Macrina Bakery, and how those came to be?
This mic is on, okay. Hi, I see my City Fruit folks in the back over there. So I'm super excited to be talking about two of our partnerships today. First, our FareStart is a nonprofit that focuses on job training within the culinary industry. Obviously, during COVID, all of our restaurants shut down. We chose not to reopen those during that time and to shift to purely just hunger relief meals. We also looked at piloting some value-added processing work. One of the partnerships that came out of that was our partnership with City Fruit. City Fruit does cleaning work in primarily public orchards around the Seattle area, and they harvest valuable fruit products that they're donating to food banks. They also have a volume of fruit that isn't in kind of that pristine condition. Maybe it's bruised, maybe it's a little buggy. It wouldn't be given with dignity if it was given out. So they donate that excess product over to us so it doesn't get put back into the waste stream, and we turn that product into applesauce. It's a great training opportunity for our students that work in our job training program to see an alternative to just production for a restaurant. We turn that applesauce into little 4-ounce single-serve portions to replace the, just shelf-stable applesauce that we used to buy. And that goes out into our school meals. We call it school meals, but it's really meals for any kiddo meals or any meals for folks who might have pretty severe dietary restrictions. And then we also send just large hotel pans and Lexans full of that applesauce over to our community meals kitchen. So right now, we're doing all of that product in-house. In addition to the City Fruit partnership during the regular harvest season, we are looking to find stable streams of apples throughout the rest of the year so we can continue creating that product year-round with the goal of turning it into a shelf-stable product that could go back both to the Hunger Relief Network, the Food Security Network, and then also potentially out onto retail shelves. Our second product that we're upcycling is we are making croutons in partnership with PCC and Macrina. We've been working on the project for a really long time. Last year, we finally got the product in stores in a wholesale capacity, and now we're just about to launch our own packaging and branding of the product in a couple of weeks.
Thank you. Brilliant. And what was the process for forming that partnership between yourselves, Macrina, and PCC?
Yeah, so we were actually approached by PCC with the concept to create a product with leftover bread. As you might know, the business model for bakery is always to overproduce. The ingredient cost is low, and so you want to have, and then the business model for grocery is to have abundant store shelves. So PCC committed to reducing their food waste, but they don't want to reduce the abundance and availability of product on their shelves for their customers. So they're looking for innovative and creative ways to do that. So they approached us, and Macrina was involved because they used to produce PCC's signature baguette, which they don't have anymore, but they still produce a lot of bread that gets sold at PCC. So PCC reached out to us, and then we looked at. It was great. We had somebody in the grocery industry who could give us product trends and tell us what products might sell well, and we settled on producing croutons for them. It's another really great training opportunity for our students, teaching knife cuts, getting really precise and exact. They also get to use this really cool contraption that's like a bread slicer, and then also just teaching really basic culinary concepts of like mise en place, setting up all of your ingredients and getting things going. And then it's a really routine recipe to go through, and so maybe folks that can't handle being in a fast-paced culinary kitchen really thrive in helping us do these value-added processing projects.
Wonderful, excellent. And so for a producer who has identified a surplus or unnecessary waste stream, what are the first steps for turning that into like actual physical sellable product or usable product?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really thinking about, it's identifying that waste first, like what products are you wasting, and then it's thinking about what is something that's missing in the market, maybe that I could produce myself or that I could partner with somebody else to produce. So when we looked at croutons, we were looking at 3 or 4 different products. We were looking at making bread flour, where you basically just grind the bread back down and create flour out of it. And it was interesting, but there's not already a sales channel for that product. Like we would have to invest so much. So we're looking at what's a product that's already people know, and then once they know our product line, we can expand, and now our waste that comes from the croutons, maybe we make bread flour with. Maybe, so we have our staple product that we know is gonna do well. So yeah, we really lucked out in that we had a grocery partner who was able to give us sales data. That was really helpful. So I think branching out and finding a partner that can share that information with you, and then just thinking about what am I passionate about, what do I care about, what do I want to make sure that people are getting.
Great, excellent. Yeah, that's really important to make sure that whatever product you identify, there's an easy market, an easy channel for it. If you have to identify it and then educate the consumer, they may not go for it, and then you're kind of wasting all of that effort. So another question, so how is this growing processing capacity within FareStart, and how is it increasing access to local foods in institutional culinary settings, not just like, direct to consumer, but
Yeah. So in doing the crouton project and this applesauce processing project, we also partner with local farms for some of our other programming on my team. And some of the local farms heard that we were doing this processing work. Folks have started reaching out to us to say, hey, this school district has a contract to purchase local food from us, but it's really hard. A lot of the products we have, they can't take in raw form. They normally buy it pre-cubed, pre-chopped, flash frozen, these things. So the money is there through these funds to purchase it, but the farmers aren't able to get the product to them in the state they need for processing in their kitchens. So we've been piloting partnerships with different farmer aggregation networks to process their food for school meals. And then we're open to taking on many of our food bank partners even, they're processing, they have leftover fruit that they can freeze, and when they get a critical mass, we can process that into jam for them to put back on their shelves. So there's lots of really great opportunity for us to reduce that food waste, to provide a training opportunity for our students, and then also because now that infrastructure is there to support local farms and things that wouldn't necessarily be food waste, but to get it into other market channels for them.
Great. So that's also cool to keep in mind that you could also become a processor and not have to worry about the end product in terms of marketing, but actually supplying the equipment and the labor to process these ingredients. All right, so final question for you. And so how does this initiative programming influence the future of food system infrastructure due to these projects supporting your training programs?
I'm not sure
Okay, so I guess the question is, so you have all these different verticals for producing product, and you did mention a little bit about the fact that you're showing your students how to utilize different equipment and so forth. So more about how training your staff benefits, like the actual students themselves. How do they benefit from this?
Oh, well, I think this is a really great opportunity. Our students are given really robust education around the culinary industry in the region, and the time that they spend working with our team is really letting them get outside of that box and to see where the skills that they are developing might fit in other areas of the food ecosystem that we have here in not only Seattle, but King County, Western Washington, all of Washington State, to be a piece of that food system supply chain in ways that they're not thinking about when they're just thinking about a restaurant. They're not thinking about how the food is getting there. But if we're bringing in food recovery and we're saying, hey, this came from a grocery store, if we're prepping product and we're showing them like, hey, this is going to go to a school kitchen, it all of a sudden expands their minds into all of the different food system jobs that are available to them. And now that they've gotten to sample doing this work, you know, they might feel really strongly. A lot of our students say, I really liked working in this restaurant, but the culinary industry isn't for me. And so they kind of do a hard pivot. So we want to make sure that we're still supporting our students in whatever career path they want to follow, but maybe it's not culinary, but maybe it is food processing. Maybe they got really excited about learning that Macrina backhauls all of the baguettes for us to their warehouse, and then we pick it up there on our way back from school meals. So our crouton project, right, like we're not spending any additional fuel costs to get that product where it needs to go. Maybe they want to be a food delivery driver. Like there's just so many other ins that they can see through participating in these specific pieces of infrastructure with us.
Wonderful. Thank you, Emily. Okay, great. Ángela, we're going to move on to you. Can you introduce yourself and describe your role at Mama Group? And also, can you also describe your food systems and waste prevention within the restaurant operations?
My name is Ángela Ortez-Zarate. I'm the Director of Quick Service Development for Mama Group, which is the group behind Mom Noon and 5 other sister restaurants. My role is, given my background, kind of a combination of culinary and operational development within our group, focusing specifically on our quick service restaurants. So I spend a lot of time thinking about how we can implement our values and actually integrate it into our operations, particularly around doing the most we can with the products that we have. So a lot of the similar thinking that Emily just mentioned in terms of having awareness and training your team to be aware of how the ingredients go through the whole process of being in our restaurant and how we can outlet that a little bit better.
Wonderful, thank you. So we know that preventing food waste is a sustainable practice. Can you describe in what ways it also provides cost savings?
Pretty directly. As you've all seen, restaurants have a notorious small margin of profit, and throwing food away is equal to throwing money away. So all of our processes kind of keep that in mind. Some examples of the food system processes that we have, food waste prevention processes, are just keeping track of what we have. So inventory tracking, making sure that we have an awareness of the quality of the products that are coming in, how close they are to their use-by date, making sure that we have a plan for that even if the sales aren't there. For example, having a pickle program, knowing that we're going to freeze something, having specials that we regularly produce that are sort of formulaic so that at any given point we're ready to incorporate that vegetable that's seasonal but maybe going bad soon. So just kind of catching it. And then integrating that with how we train people. So everyone from the dishwasher who's helping wash the produce to the lead who's making sure that everyone's following our food waste log is aware. Our food waste log is also super important. It's very simple. I would recommend everyone do it. It's essentially just what are we wasting, how much, and quick question, why, and could we have prevented it? And I think just having that on there, no one gets in trouble if that's what happened, but just having that awareness instilled at every level is really how you integrate it, and then holding people accountable to that process.
Wonderful. And what primarily motivates you to pursue these solutions? And are they the same motivators for everybody on your team?
I think for me personally, sustainability is super important. I think being resourceful and pragmatic is just how we live as responsible humans on this planet, I think. And I don't know if that's necessarily the same motivator for my staff. I think the more they learn, the more they're interested in it, much like Emily was saying in terms of FareStart and their education. But at the very base level, they want to do a good job and do well at their work. And if we're monitoring these metrics, I think it just sort of integrates it. So.
And so I know you mentioned the food waste log. So how do you also manage adherence to these operational systems where they can be, when there can be different communities, commitments to these values among your staff?
Well, I think integrating values into any sort of work can be challenging, especially when there are so many different folks involved and so many different motivators. But I think that the adherence is really in holding folks accountable. So it is important for the manager to know that the lead is going to follow up with the crew, and having that sort of like top-down reinforcement of the same things that we're doing. The other aspect, though, is really around training. So from the beginning, your knife skills are such that you're not going to waste that onion. The ends of that onion we're going to use in a stock. The stock we're going to use in a soup or a special or a sauce. So having that sort of like life cycle be reinforced at every level, I think is really how you would enforce it.
Great, thank you. And final question, how do you go about reducing barriers preventing restaurants and food businesses how do we go about reducing barriers preventing restaurants and food businesses for more efficient and complete use of ingredients? So what would you recommend? You're a restaurant, you do the same thing you always do, but you want to make a change, you want to do things differently.
I think so much of it really starts with awareness. Look at your trash cans. What are you throwing away and why? And trying to understand, okay, like we always cut off the ends of bread. Should I be making croutons, for example? Or really identifying what would be, especially from the culinary creative side of things, I think you can be really playful with it. It doesn't have to be the sort of, really like regimented, sterile process. It's beautiful to use every part of the ingredient. We're in such a beautiful place. The Pacific Northwest has such a great harvest. There's so many different ways that we can implement that, and I think finding ways to get excited about it for all those different reasons, more than just, the panic of we're wasting money or we're, have these small margins, I think can be really inspiring to both yourself for your own sense of hope, and then also for the people around you, because I think the restaurant industry is full of people who want to do right by their communities in all these different ways, and we're so integrated in the food system that it's just an opportunity to bridge that gap.
And do you do any marketing around these initiatives to the customers so they know what you're doing?
We should. We're not great at it. I would say we probably lack in that. Sorry, boss, wherever you are. Increase our marketing budget. But I think that having ways to talk about it with your staff, especially the ones that are guest-facing, is really helpful. At our quick service restaurants, we are fully compostable. Even that is an expense that we take on when people talk about, oh, wow, you increased your prices this year. Really, like, yes, you noticed, but also this is where it's going, or we've increased wages. Like, it doesn't have to be a long conversation. It doesn't have to be a dissertation. It can just be like, we care about people, we care about products, so we're taking these actions. You can support us as a customer and kind of integrating that in.
So that's another thing to keep in mind, that consumers do actually want to know when you're trying to help the environment. And we know that everybody's dollars are tight, people are eating out less, they're spending less money. But if you give them an incentive, a reason to buy from you because you do care and their values align with yours, then that's a great thing to take into account in your marketing. Okay, great. Sheryl, I think you're doing the first presentation that we have up.
I think so. Do you want me to stand or stay seated?
Yeah, you can totally stand, whatever makes you comfortable and allows you to do the presentation as best as possible.
I can stay seated because it's quite cozy over here. Yeah, thank you.
There's an edge back here, so we don't want to slide all the way off.
Yeah, here. Is it better if I stand on that side, or do you want me to?
It's up to you. Just whatever you can see.
Okay. No, I can see. Let's see if I can get a hold of the clicker here. So, I appreciate it. Thank you. Hi, everyone. How's everyone doing? Hopefully awake with some coffee. I'm Sheryl Anayas, and I'm with Seattle Public Utilities, Seattle Solid Waste Division specifically. And I want to give a quick shout out before I give this presentation to Global Impact Collective, which is, see Katie with her hands up, and Rena, I think, is also with the team, the primary consultant that helped us engage in this project since last fall. And I'll get into the meat of the presentation in just a few slides. And also, I do want to acknowledge my colleague Liz Ficus, who many of you may know as well. She works on the commercial side of the food waste prevention topic within SPU. And I focus primarily on residential, but one of the things that I do want to emphasize is that we both work specifically in kind of this intersectional space, which we'll see shortly here in the upcoming slides. Okay, so this is just a quick snapshot of the project timeline, which, like I said, started back in earnest back in August, which feels like such a long time ago. But in short, the work was really around conducting listening sessions, interviews approximately about an hour long, to get at these core questions. And just to take a step back, so again, I represent government, and typically we don't get this luxury of extensive customer feedback that we build into our programs, and I think we're getting better. And with food waste prevention in particular, it's an ever-evolving issue and topic, and my colleague Liz and I really wanted to dig our heels deeply into these questions, again, so we could think more critically about the problem and how to design appropriate programs, whether it was a technical assistance program or materials. So just to give you some context there. So some of the three main core questions driving the work here: can food be used as a community connector to bring all of us in the city together to save food? And from what I can tell, just from being in this event here for the past hour or so, is the answer seems to be yes. And I'll get into what we found out from our interviews shortly. Two, who needs to be at the table when it comes to talking about food waste prevention? Again, as a government employee, I know with confidence that it cannot be done unilaterally, and we really need to lean on our partners in the business community and elsewhere to really get at the heart of the issue. And thirdly, we wanted to ask the question around partnerships and opportunities, which I've been hearing quite a bit of at this event. Just the theme is very resonant. And that's really to lean into this idea that we have to think creatively in order to really solve the problem around food waste. Again, just this quick snapshot of the timeline here and where we're at. We're sort of at this phase of closing up the report, but by no means are we at the end of the process. This is part of a multi-phase work, so we're sort of in this discovery space, but we hope to enter into work around implementation, so gathering all the feedback that we've received from the diverse stakeholders in these interviews and coming up with some initial ideas around what we could do in terms of partnerships. And when I use the word partnership, I'm speaking very broadly. So we'll see shortly here what that could look like. So this is just a quick slide around design thinking. I won't go into the details here, but design thinking is really, as many of you may know, is focused on human-centered thinking, right? How do we think more critically about an issue at hand and sort of go back and forth into these spaces, right? From empathizing, defining an issue, and like that's highlighted here in red. We're in this ideation phase, so that means that we're sort of thinking very carefully about what are those ideas that have been popping up more specifically in these interviews. And then at some point, like I noted just a moment ago, we want to get into prototyping, creating some actual programs or resources, and that's TBD, but we are taking our time here in this ideation stage. And this is a quick reminder that I'm speaking specifically about prevention. I won't get into all the details on this wasted food scale that was wonderfully created by EPA, but this essentially gets at what are the actions that we can all take to prioritize prevention and diversion. And I have colleagues on my team that are not here, but they focus on the diversion side of the work, which is extensive. Next slide here. So again, one of the core questions that we were trying to get at in this research work is trying to understand, can businesses serve as messengers, impactful and key messengers in talking about food waste prevention? And conversely, can all of us in this room as consumers influence businesses to care about prevention? And from what I can tell, I think the answer is yes, from just talking to many of you at this event. And you can see here on the slide that we're trying to get at this intersectional space because I primarily work in residential as an audience space, and then my colleague, like I mentioned earlier, Liz Ficus, works in the commercial sector. But really, there's so much more beyond the household for myself. There's much more work that occurs beyond the business sector for Liz. It's, you know, those food-facing businesses where we want to understand the opportunities, like Emily had mentioned, the crouton example, and then Ángela talking about, you know, how she's doing waste logging, which is music to my ears, by the way, and really elevating those stories. And we, Liz and I, say this constantly, making the visible, invisible visible, what that narrative looks like when it comes to prevention. Because I'll say this here, and I may have included in another slide, is the terms food waste prevention may not resonate with people, right? It doesn't sound delicious, right? It doesn't sound sexy. It sort of has this negative connotation, so better understanding appropriate terms comes from listening to many who touch this space, work in food systems, and that's, again, beyond what we do in government. We need to sort of reach across the aisle. And I put on the slide just a few metrics because I'm from government, so I can't come on stage without talking a little bit about metrics. So in terms of where it shows up, roughly it's about 20% of food still appears in our garbage. Even though in 2015 we had a ban to prevent food going into the garbage, it's still in the garbage, meaning it's rotting in our landfills, producing methane. I won't go into sort of the complexity behind the climate change issue, but it's real and it's significant, and there's more that we can do to shift that narrative. And that's sort of my point there at the end, that we can all make small changes to really make an impact. And this is just a quick example of what we've sort of been thinking about as we've been conducting these listening sessions. This example is specific to grocery stores, this idea around abundance, that customers may, well, let me take a step back and say, grocery stores may think that that's what the consumer wants, and therefore they create abundance, whether it's in the produce aisle or wherever you're walking through the store. Whereas we could shift that to be more in tune to the reality of what a customer wants, right? And that's where you see in the other image there, the alternate reality where a grocery store is changing that food waste prevention narrative and then listening to what consumer feedback looks like and reversing or revising that feedback loop to represent something that's more in line with what we should see when it comes to thinking more critically about food waste prevention models in a grocery store specifically. And so what are the learnings that we gain from doing this listening session work? And I should also back up and say, I don't know if I mentioned it earlier, we were able to interview well over 100 individuals representing a broad spectrum of communities, businesses, demographics, and by no means was it a substantial sample, but was significant enough to allow us to think about or to discover some interesting learnings. So these are just some that bubbled to the top that we thought would be sort of more relevant to this audience. So we spoke to quite a few folks, like some of you in the room, so thanks again for those who've participated, like chefs and others that work on the operations side in businesses. And, you know, we learned that there's quite a bit of activity already going on in terms of actions that people are already doing around prevention, whether it's repurposing, pickling, preserving, and again, my panelists have spoken a bit about that, shifting in the culture, thinking about how to reduce plate size, portions, removing buffets, potentially offering to-go containers, and we should be seeing that as standard. It's not always the case. And sort of the creative brain power that goes into partnerships. Again, Emily mentioned a really great one around with PCC and Macrina partnering together to prevent extra waste from that bread, which is phenomenal. And we also recognize through these interviews that there's a great deal of chef leadership that's occurring, which is remarkable. And again, it goes back to what I also noted earlier about telling that story and how can we elevate these voices, create visibility. And I should acknowledge here that it became pretty clear in some of these interviews that chefs were acknowledged as a necessary authority, sort of created relevance around this topic, because they do have this ability to make food waste prevention sound delicious and be delicious, which we in government would not be able to do, I'd say. And then this has been brought up earlier in the day too, this idea that many restaurants, unfortunately, as my panelists have mentioned, are still dealing with the challenges post-pandemic. There hasn't really been this true recovery, and we, are leaning into that and want to make sure that we're thinking about that as we design programs. And that there is an opportunity to come together around this topic, which seemed to resonate really well with people. And let's see here. The connection of food, I'll also note, was something that came up, or sort of lack of connection, because it's not unusual from what we heard for people to not necessarily know where food comes from, and that may not make it as meaningful to them or precious, and therefore it's no big deal if they throw it away, right? And I don't know, Logan, how much time I have, so I want to be mindful.
Would be helpful to speed up a little.
Okay, yeah, sure. No, I'm going to sort of zip through these slides because these are going to touch on examples of what a partnership could look like. And I know Cullen over here is with the state, and she'll talk about maybe the Safeway partnership. And then I'll just breeze through these. This is one where we, Seattle Public Utilities, partnered with the Intentionalists and spotlighted businesses that are doing incredible sustainable work in the region, or in the city of Seattle. And this is an example where art was used. This is a mural project that was initiated in Nashville, where they've done a series of murals with private entities like Patagonia and a local co-op to basically talk about food waste prevention on these privately owned buildings, which has gotten massive following. And I'll skip over that one, and I'm going to close here. This is just a slide to sort of kickstart our discussion around partnership, but I don't know if I need to pause here. Is that, okay.
Great, thank you. Cullen?
Yeah.
Thanks, Sheryl. All right, last one. Here we go. So my name is Cullen Naumoff, and I am the organics lead at the Washington State Department of Ecology. So this state agency and our legislators are also concerned about food waste, and we are investing, your state legislators are investing in food waste prevention. So that's what I'm here to talk to you about. Okay, I'm going to skip that. So why do we care about food waste? I want to throw a little data at you too. So the state legislators a couple of years ago made some very bold and totally reachable goals, as long as we're all working together, to divert 75% of the total organic material from our Washington state landfills and divert 50% of our food waste. You can see we have some work to do. So there are some laws in place that we'll still talk a little bit about how we're going to really drive movement towards that, in addition to all of this important conversation we've had on the panel today. What I think is really interesting is that blue bar. You probably can't see what the other things represent, but this is what our landfills look like. That blue bar is food. It is all food. We got to deal with that. We can do better. Interestingly, 9% of the organic material in our landfills is pet manure. Not joking. I put that out there for all you entrepreneurs in the room. Can you figure that one out? Anyways, all right. So the state said in 2022, we have to, at the state level, create the Center for Sustainable Food Management. And that's who I'm representing here today. You can see that's outlined in that state statute if you're curious at the bottom. And because of that, in just 2 years, your state has invested in 8 new team members at the state level to help figure out how to get organics and food out of the landfill, again, from a state agency perspective. So the very first thing that we launched was a big social and behavioral education campaign statewide. And there was a lot of message testing that was done about why do we care about food waste prevention? Is it because when we put food waste in the landfill, it is one of the leading causes of climate change due to methane? No, that does not sell. Saving money sells, and this is what we've heard time and time again. So this is some of I hope some of the things you might have seen around our state. You can see it was also translated into an entire Spanish campaign as well. This was run both in April and again in the holiday season. So again, there's, putting education around our state to both consumers and businesses alike. As Sheryl alluded to, we had a pilot partnership with Safeway. So in partnership with Safeway and the Use Food Well branding, these types of messages were in 180 different stores across Safeway. We also leveraged several of Safeway's partnerships, including maybe you heard these ads at the Mariners game. One of my colleagues said, I was having my eyebrows threaded and I heard the Use Food Well message on the radio. So again, we're trying to touch a lot of different audiences in a lot of different ways. We are about to kick off our business research, our business partnership. So for any of you who own a food service business and or are generating some type of food waste and are looking for useful tools or resources, maybe that's a video, maybe that's something else, and you'd like to tell us about it, we are in the midst of an interview process that we are also happy to compensate you for. So if you're interested in participating in that research, please find me afterwards. Those resources should be available this summer. And the other thing I do want to mention is it is not only in Seattle, but across the state, for a vast majority of the businesses, it is now required to not send your organic waste, including food, to the landfill. So again, there's some nuances to that law, but I do want to be clear that we are now at a point in our state, which is really cool, that we're saying, hey, there's more value to our food and our organic material than sending it to the landfill. Let's think a little bit more critically about that, and your legislators voted for that. We have also been in partnership with the University of Washington to develop a state food rescue map. So what does that mean? It means that with the support of some graduate students, we have identified with this map, which again will be publicly available this summer, all the opportunities for edible food rescue across our state and partnerships with hunger relief organizations to distribute that edible food opportunity through. So this will be a really great way. This is a connecting tool, and again, you can look for it available. You can search by your address this summer. You can see how this will be listed. So if you could also see if you're a business listed on this map, and you can see what the information will be displayed. So again, we love any comments to say, you know, I'd rather have my hours for edible food rescue be published specifically on that versus just my normal operating hours. Because what this map could do is it could allow someone, an HRO, a hunger relief organization, or an independent person to actually contact you to say, do you want to participate in this program with us? Again, this is really meant to be a connecting tool across the state. And we are also actively working on tracking our progress towards food rescue. So our state in statute, which is a big deal, has a goal that says by 2030, 5 years, we have to be rescuing 50% of the edible food in our landfills and making sure that is going to human consumption. So we're also in the midst of a big project to help us better understand where we are at in that process. So again, if you're interested in talking about data, happy to have that conversation afterwards. Food Waste Prevention Week, Sheryl touched on this. It's coming up again in April. We would love any interest or participation. If you want to be a partner organization in this, there's always a big competition between Washington and Oregon. Typically, Washington is the leader in food waste prevention across this country. You can please sign up with us here. We're happy to talk more about that. Again, we had many events hosted throughout the entire state that engaged people, whether it was at food rescue trivia night, whether it was, at big events at hunger relief organizations. So there's lots of ways that there's engagement happening across the state on food waste prevention. This is saying, talk to us about Food Waste Prevention Week. And yeah, finally reach out to us. But I think the big takeaway from me is that the legislators here in our state are interested in food waste prevention. We have a big team now to support you all, and if you're looking for resources, or if you're actually even just like, hey, I need some cranberries, do you know anyone who has access? That kind of information is traveling through us all the time. Don't hesitate to reach out to us, because we're happy to be a connector for y'all. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. So we do have some more questions on our side, but I just want to see if there are any hands up for questions for the panel, just so we have a feeling for time, because we have about 15 minutes left. Any questions right now? Go for it.
I know you touched on this already, but as somebody who works on like the food prep side of things in a restaurant, I think that I want to highlight. I want to highlight the labor side of things, because like it's a great idea, and like my chef knows that it's a great idea to use the end of the onion in a stock, but there's no room in the fridge, and we're like, as prep workers, we feel so much pressure to do as much as we can in a short amount of time, and it's always a squeeze. And I'm like, I'm not exactly asking for solutions right now, but I think that's just like, I really want to highlight that for everybody who's thinking about food reduction waste. Like the labor side of it, I think, is one of the biggest challenges. That's all.
I think you're totally right. And I think that when we, yes, we can see the trash that is in the compost, but we are also, especially if it's been prepared, throwing away a bunch of labor hours in that as well. And I think there are different ways to mitigate that. At different spaces, I've been able to lower my food costs and increase my labor costs to like make that either their wages higher or have a more efficient use of people's time. And I think it really just depends on every space, but I do think there are options for every kind of restaurant, every kind of food service business to sort of really pay attention to what are those small margins where you can make that bigger difference. Thinking about volume, freezing things, like kind of having a seasonality to your own work, I think is part of it. But you're totally right. Labor is a huge part of this.
Can you hear me now? Okay, great. Yeah, that's definitely something to keep in mind. Do you have any suggestions for establishments that do have storage issues? Like, how do you really get around that if you can't freeze everything, or you don't have enough room in your dry storage to hold things that you've like pickled and whatnot?
That's where I think the diversion programs come into play. There are, we partner with Mary's Place, for example, they'll come by and pick up on certain days. So our team knows to kind of organize their prep around when someone's going to come pick up things in the afternoon, for example. But there are other nonprofits that do it. Yeah.
And then, so back to diversion, how best can businesses and how can they partner with other nonprofits and other groups like that to work more on the diversion aspect of it before things move on to like, getting into the waste stream? Are there other ideas that you guys have seen that work?
I would just say that in terms of being ahead of the game, like always being aware, knowing what's happening next week instead of like right in front of you. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I would add, as on the side of an organization that does pick up food waste, just one, shouting out the Good Food Forum. post extra stuff that you have on there. And we even, we take in food recovery and we do gleaning, and sometimes we realize this is way more than we're going to be able to use and distribute, so we redistribute it that way. There's always an organization, we posted a ton of bread on there that we knew we couldn't use, and we were like, nobody's going to want this bread, and immediately somebody replied, and we're so thankful to come pick it up. So there's always people that will use it. It's just a matter of tapping in and finding that network and finding how you can do it quickly. And then I think too, in thinking about our crouton project, we really had to train the PCC staff members that were pulling bread. No, this isn't just going to go in the compost. We're going to set this aside. So building out, right? It seems like people know and are aware and really want to do the best that they can. So that doesn't seem like a problem. But in other areas and other spaces, getting people on board with those operational shifts, even when they're small, they take a long time. So having really realistic expectations and setting small but achievable goals.
And again, another shout out for the Good Food Connection. So if you do have food that you don't want to have go to waste, you can always post it on the board so that people know that it's available. Great. Sorry, goodfoodexchange.org. So keep that in mind. If you haven't registered already, highly recommend it. So for Cullen, I have a question for you. So the Use Food webpage cites that reducing food waste can pay businesses back at an average rate of 7 to 1. Can you break this down for us a little bit?
Certainly, and I do want to say that data is from ReFed, and who of course has a big data insights engine. And great strategies for businesses to manage their food waste, but generally this comes back exactly to what we were talking about before, that when you better manage your inventory, which means you're buying less, maybe you're having smaller plates, and the other piece of this puzzle is that managing your food waste lowers your solid waste, whether that's your garbage or your organic spill. So there's a lot of different factors embedded into that, but it's what we were hearing before, is that food waste prevention is just a good business strategy. And again, it hits on a lot of different levels of that.
And also, reach out to your distributors and see if they have flexibility in those minimums. Whether it's using one person in a car for 1 hour to go do will call pickup, instead of always trying to hit their minimums, which usually feel really, really high, and then you end up ordering food that you don't need.
Totally.
It takes up space. It's a waste of your money, so now you're spending dollars that could be used somewhere else. So, reach out to your distributors and give a little pushback on that and say, look, times are tough, money's tight, what can you do for me? I've been a loyal customer of yours for 5, 10, 15 years. What can you do for me?
And I'll also mention there are some great food waste tracking softwares, but also I love the food waste log. It doesn't have to be fancy, right? It's just a spreadsheet. Yeah, I'm sure like Google Sheets or something. But yeah, it doesn't have to be this fancy thing. It's just paying attention and tracking it.
And Cullen, I have one more question for you. So how does buying locally grown and harvested food help businesses reduce food waste?
I'm so happy you asked me this question, Logan. I also say in my former life, I worked on the front end of the supply chain, and I was colleagues with Elliot Smith who's moderating the panel. So local food has a longer shelf life, my friends. And this is because it's not traveling long distances. And I have a great example of this from my former life where I worked with food hubs that were selling into school kitchens. And one of the school kitchens did a food waste tracking study. So she received romaine ribbons bagged in for schools from a mainline distributor, and then she also she got some local romaine lettuce heads. And she did a time study. So she said, how long does it take me to open each bag, separate the slimy romaine ribbons from the good ones, versus how long does it take my labor to chop now all these heads of lettuce that, again, the average farmer isn't giving you pre-processed lettuce. And that's how she made the case. Much cheaper for her to chop the lettuce from the locals because it had a longer shelf life over time. Plus, again, it was just this more exciting, valuable crunch to the students as well. But yeah, I think it really comes down to shelf life when you buy local. It's dramatic once you start tracking it.
So just again, it takes a little bit of time and maybe a little bit of labor to get that data from your individual operations in your kitchens, but it's valuable data. You may find that you're actually bleeding money in terms of labor costs, doing something that, you just have to break it down. Will it be effective for me to use labor to process this ingredient, or is it better for me to get it pre-processed, but to do that math on your own in-house so that you're informed about the choices that you should make are critical. Great. So in closing, this is just for the audience. Close your eyes, or not, and imagine, if you can, what innovative partnerships you could come up with to move your food waste and prevention forward, whether it's working with the city, whether it's working with nonprofits, looking your network, expand, and start thinking about it. Does anybody else have any other questions before we close out? Yes.
There are, in addition to like the Good Food Forum online, there's also lots of infrastructure projects happening. There's aggregation networks, right, where we're seeing 15, 20, 25 small farms aggregating their products together. So I think that the willingness is there. Farmers are often inherently collaborative. They want to work together. But it also takes trust building and showing them that it's worth their time and money, because they don't have a lot of either of those things. So I'll also shout out the South Seattle Community Food Hub project is working to develop that shared infrastructure. And there's lots of other projects similar to that working on that these days.
And just a little add there that the state is also interested in that for sure, certainly at Ecology, but also at the Department of Commerce. So Department of Commerce, there are some recipients of the Industrial Symbiosis Grant, and that is the exact principle that you're suggesting, that one entity's waste becomes another valuable resource. So that's another great way to kind of fund these efforts.
Great, wonderful, everybody. And again, remember, food is the absolute connector. It's the one thing we all have in common. We can't live without it. We can't function without it. And it's the core part of why we're all here, because we're all passionate about food, passionate what it does in our lives and how it brings us all together. So thank you all for participating, and enjoy the rest of your day.